Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Planning Committee on, March the 19th. And I'll go through the usual Chair's declaration. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend the public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Please do not spend time collecting your personal items. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed once you've left the building. The assembly point is on the High Street outside the Guildhall. And most importantly, members are please reminded to use their microphone when speaking and move it towards you if necessary. Thank you. Okay, Margaret, do we have any substitutes or apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have no substitutes today or no apologies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're just going to go through, Steph's going to mention something about declarations of interest because we've got some City Council applications today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's two City Council applications on the agenda today, both for the commandery. Neither application has been to any council committees previously, so unless anyone has any personal declarations to raise on either of those, everybody's fine to participate and vote. Nothing? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll just go through the minutes of the previous planning committee, which was the 12th of February. Just page by page. Page 1. Page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6. So is everyone happy that's a true reflection of the meeting? And thank you, Margaret, for those minutes. We've also got two Conservation Advisory Panel minutes. These are just for noting, and as usual, they're of interest to everybody, I'd have thought. They had meetings on the 7th of January and 4th of February. I'll take it that you've all read those. Okay, thank you. We had a site visit today for agenda item 11, Perrywood Walk. I'd like to thank all the members who came along and officers for accompanying us. I think we found it really, really useful. Margaret, do we have any public participation or representation, please?
We have no public participation, Chair, but we do have public representation on agendas items 9 and 10, which is Mark Sherwood as representing the applicant. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to move to agenda item 9 and Paul's just going to explain why. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. So before we get to agenda item 9, you will have seen in the late papers that a decision has been made to defer agenda item 8. And I just refer members to the late paper for agenda item 8, but also the page before. Members will be aware that since the publication of the officer reports, that the inspector's report for the South Worcestershire Development Plan review has been received by the council, and that a committee and a meeting has been scheduled for next week for the proposal adoption of the new local plan. As set out within the late paper, paragraph 49 of the NPPF allows weight to be given to emerging plans, and it's based upon how advanced they are. Given the advanced nature of the plan, officers are advising that substantial weight can now be given to the emerging plan. In respect of the agenda item 8 for Blackpool Retail Park, you'll see within the late paper that the new policy SWDP R12 adds a little bit of an extra within the policy, which catches variations of conditions for retail impact assessments. That was different to what was being considered. So officers took the view that it couldn't be considered under the old policy. It was something that needed to be considered under the new. And given that divergence between the two policies, it was felt that a deferral to allow the applicants to be able to consider the application and provide a retail impact assessment so that members of this committee can fully consider the impact of that application in line with the new policy, so that we are up to date and that we don't cause any difficulties with our nice shiny new plan should it be adopted. So the decision was made to defer that application. So we'll now move on to agenda item 9 and 10, and having agreed it with the chair, I've decided and we've agreed to do a joint presentation for agenda item 9 and 10, as they both concern the same items, and I'll go through both of those developments now. So Margaret, if we can fire up the PowerPoint, please. Oh, it helps if I turn it on, doesn't it? Thank you, Margaret. That was my fault, not yours. So, members, this presentation relates to the two applications for the commandery at Sidbury, which is a Grade 1 listed building of national importance. The applications relate to electrical works and resurfacing and drainage improvements. The commandery, as members will be aware, is one of Worcester's most historically significant buildings, with origins as a medieval hospital and surviving fabric dating primarily from the 15th century, with later additions and alterations. And members will be aware that a number of listed building applications have recently been considered on the site. These current proposals are separate and relate to operational and environmental improvements to the site. So we're going to start off with application 2500739 LB, which is for electrical works. This application seeks for electrical works to improve the power supply, safety and operational functionality across the site. The proposals primarily affect internal areas within the canal wing, together with limited external works to the rear garden between existing buildings. The plan there shows the line of the cabling which goes through the middle garden area. The first element relates to the provision of a new external power supply within the rear garden area to support events and operational use within the site. This includes the installation of a 32 amp single phase commando socket mounted at low level on a timber post positioned discreetly between an existing buttress to minimise the impact, and you can see the location as on the slide. The associated cable will then be installed with a trench, which is approximately 450 millimetres deep, routed through the soft ground and along the existing pathway. And again, you can see the line of the cabling there, and then heading towards the building. It will enter the building at a low level through an existing mortar joint, and then internally the cable will run through the surface mounting trunking at skirting level and then follow the existing cable routes to the main distribution board. And so we've got the low level insertion within the existing mortar joint into the building, and then a series of photos that show the direction of the cabling through the building, and you've got the floor plan to show the exact locations of that. The second element for electrical works relate to a new power supply from the cafe building to the adjacent garage block. This will again involve a narrow trench, approximately 450 mils deep, routed along the narrow corridor between the buildings. The cable will enter the garage through the mortar joint and will be run internally in black enamelled conduit fixed through the mortar joints to minimise impact on the historic fabric. And so we've got a plan showing the location from the cafe to the garage, and then you can see that the line on the right hand side bottom photo shows the direction from along that wall towards the garage block, and then the internal works. Within the garage, a small distribution board will be installed with new wiring to serve the lighting and provide 2 additional electric sockets. Wherever possible, existing cable containment and routes will be utilised to reduce the need for any new interventions. Across both elements, the works have been carefully designed and will be low impact and reversible. There is no removal of historic fabric, and all elements are through mortar joints rather than brickwork, or through timber, or rather than going through timber framing. Internal cable runs are confined with existing surfaces, service areas, or previously disturbed locations. Overall, this represents a modest and proportionate upgrade to the building's electrical infrastructure, enabling a safer and more flexible use to the site, particularly in relation to events, operational requirements, without adversely affecting the historic character and significance. So moving on to the second application in respect of resurfacing works to the driveway, and it relates to the driveway, footpaths and car parking areas, together with the improvement to the French drain to improve drainage. The works relate to external areas to the north and northeast of the building, including the outer garden driveway and areas adjacent to the Great Hall and Canal Range. These are areas of existing hard standing which currently suffer from wear, potholing and very poor drainage. Just some existing photos for you showing the existing gravelled hard surface area. And again, for those who've been around the rear of the commandery, you'll recognise those photos. The resurfacing proposals involve the removal of the upper layer of existing material and its replacement with a permeable, self-binding gravel surface. This approach maintains the informal and historic character of the setting while improving usability and accessibility. New edging details are also proposed to contain the gravel and prevent overspill into adjacent lawns, creating a more coherent and visually attractive appearance. In addition, a French drain is proposed immediately to the north of the Great Hall. This will involve a deeper excavation than the general resurfacing works and intended to improve surface water management and reduce moisture build-up adjacent to the building's walls. The submitted heritage statement assessment identifies that the majority of the resurfacing works are shallow in depth and are unlikely to impact on archaeological remains. However, areas close to the building, including the French drain, have a greater depth of intervention and therefore a moderate potential to affect archaeological deposits. This has been assessed through the recommended conditions, requiring detail of design and on-site investigation, and a construction method statement to ensure appropriate safeguards and monitoring throughout the works. Historic England have raised no objections to the principle of the works, supporting the use of permeable materials and improved drainage, while emphasising the importance of careful detailing, particularly in relation to the surfacing of materials, coloured and edging, which can be controlled through conditions. Overall, the works are proposed to represent a positive enhancement to the setting of the listed building and will improve accessibility, address existing drainage issues and provide a more cohesive, better maintained external environment while preserving the informal character of the site. In considering both of the applications before members, Section 16(2) of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act of 1990 requires special regard to the desirability of preserving the building, its setting and features of architectural and historic interest. Officers consider that both proposals represent low impact, carefully designed interventions. The electric works are minor and reversible and routed without harm to the historic fabric. The resurfacing and drainage works enhance the setting, improve drainage and accessibility, and maintain the character and the site through appropriate materials. Subject to conditions controlling materials and archaeological implications, both applications are considered to preserve the significance of the Grade 1 listed building. Officers therefore recommend that both listed building consents are approved, subject to the conditions set out within the respective reports. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. I hope that was clear for everybody, combining the reports. We thought it was sensible. We've got Mark Sherwood here. I don't know whether you want to add anything to the officer's presentation at all. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to add that the car park resurfacing is a maintenance item. So as was mentioned in the report, it has become quite consolidated, and a number of sort of potholes, and the French drain will also help to protect the elevation of the Great Hall, the timber frame building on that face. The excavation works for the electric supplies. That is more a sort of functionality. But it's also bearing in mind that on both applications that we are excavating into made ground, so there will be an existing sort of a couple of inches of top course and then hardcore underneath. So before we actually get to the sort of the finished ground underneath, we will be sort of going through about 4 inches of sort of already made ground. So the archaeological excavation implications are limited. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Mark at all, please? Thank you. Councillor Barnes, thank you.
Thank you. The mature trees that are on site, will there be any implication? Right? You've just said that the ground is currently compacted, which isn't very good for trees. So is there any, I take it the trees are listed because they're on a listed site?
Through you, Chair, as they're in the conservation area, they will be protected through the conservation area.
Right. And as a new permeable surface is being put in, presumably that's a positive thing rather than a negative thing for the trees. Can you confirm?
Through you, Chair, absolutely, that would be the case.
Thank you.
Councillor Rudge?
Thank you, Chair. Mark, can you just say something about the sample that they're talking about, the sample edging and the sample aggregates? Is that's been done or that's going to be done?
No, that will be done. It's going to be one of the conditions. We have sort of looked at various sort of gravels and aggregates at the moment with the landscaping officer, and we've also talked about edgings as well. So it will be something we'd explore, and we'd have a sample made up for approval.
Do I have any other questions for the speaker? Councillor Agar?
Thank you. In relation to the last comments, I think it's important that we don't end up with an aggregate that is a glaring colour. You know, it needs to sort of blend in with the historic area, I think. And yeah, and I would hope, I mean, I don't know, presumably there's the archaeology officer, a designated officer will be overseeing the various works, will they?
Yeah, I mean, from the archaeological side, we will have, when we do the excavations for the electrical works, there will be a watching brief and a written scheme investigation before we commence. So there'll be an archaeologist on site when we excavate, just to, if we do come across anything. And as far as, yeah, the actual specification and colour of the aggregate, that will be down to an approved sample, which will be approved by the planning team.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. Thank you very much for coming. It's been very useful, as always. Thank you. Can I move for questions for the officer, please, for Paul? So, does anybody have anything? Or would anybody like to make a comment on the application, therefore? The applications, Councillor Cross.
Thank you. Relating to the resurfacing works, comforted by the condition number 4, about the construction method statement. So that basically, given comfort that actually this is paying attention to the fabric of the building and making sure we're not causing any problems by doing this work. So that really answers the questions that otherwise I would have, and that, you know, there's going to be this construction method statement. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cross, and I think you're absolutely right. One thing that I'm always concerned about with historic buildings is actually vibration. So seeing that as part of the condition is really, really good to see. Thank you. Councillor Agar?
It occurs to me, Chair, that not everyone will necessarily be sure what a French drain actually is. And we did have some conversation about the maintenance of it. I wonder if the officers could give us a steer on what that is so that everybody's clear.
Yeah, of course, and through you, Chair. In terms of a French drain, it's a pipe that's a perforated pipe within the ground, which then has a gravel element across the top, so that any surface water then goes through the gravel into the drain and then is drained away. And there was a slight cut-through picture on the slide, so it's a historic way of being able to drain things, and it's long before sustainable urban drainage was in existence. French drains were provided to be able to provide that, and the Great Hall has got one right in the front, so it's quite nice to be able to maintain that and get that up to date.
Thanks, because I mean, my impression was that it's a linear soakaway, basically. Thank you.
And quite unobtrusive, you know, rather than a big grill or something like that you'd see, like, you know, on a road. Does anybody else want to make any comments at all? Go on, Councillor Kimberley.
Thank you, Chair. As I was reading through this document and listening through the officer presentation, exactly as I was coming to questions like how are you going to preserve the stonework and ensure that isn't damaged, that question was answered. How are you going to ensure that the gravel is the right kind of material and that it's that the concerns raised by Historic England are properly answered? That question was answered. It's a really, really solid pair of proposals. I can't see any difficulty with passing them, to be quite honest with you. I'd be quite happy to propose when the time comes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Kimberley. And would your proposal stand with the existing recommendation conditions?
Absolutely, with those conditions in place. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Would you like to make that as a formal recommendation, Councillor Udall? I'm seconding the recommendations suggested by Councillor Kimberley. Would you like to put your speaker on? So it's
Sorry, I should know that by now, shouldn't I? Been here long enough. I just wish to formally second the recommendation by suggestion made by Councillor Kimberley.
If I take that as a recommendation for item 9 first of all, please, if that's okay. So we'll do that one first because I've got to do them each separately. Is that okay? Is everyone happy to move to the vote for agenda item 9? Yes, okay. So can I see all hands in favour? Oh, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So do we have any further comments on our agenda item 10? Or would we like to move to a vote for that? So I need a proposer and a seconder. Shall I have someone different? There we go. So Councillor Amos, would you like to propose? Is that what you're saying?
I would indeed, Chair.
You would. And you're happy with the conditions as written?
I am.
Thank you. And Councillor Rudge, I saw your hand too.
Yes, Chair. Can I read these words? Will improve accessibility and drainage while respecting and preserving the historic and archaeological significance of the site. I don't think we can say fairer than that. I would be happy to second. With the existing conditions? Yes.
And that's for... Therefore, can we see all hands in favour? That's unanimous as well. Great, lovely, thank you very much. So we'll now move to agenda item 11. This is the Perrywood Walk, and the presentation is from Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 11 relates to the householder plan application seeking retrospective planning permission for the erection of a two-storey side extension, single-storey front and rear extensions, and a loft conversion incorporating a rear dormer window. The application has been called in at the request of Councillor Riaz, so that all facts, including resident concerns about the size, scale and planning history, can be considered to ensure an informed decision is made. I'd first like to draw members' attention to the late paper circulated following the publication of the officer report. Members should note that the South Worcestershire Development Plan review is expected to be considered for adoption later this month. While the adopted development plan remains the statutory basis for decision making, paragraph 49 of the NPPF advises that the weight to be given to emerging policies depends on their stage of preparation, as Paul alluded to earlier. The extent of unresolved objections and their consistency with national policy. In this context, the adopted plan should now be read alongside the emerging SWDPR, which carries significant weight given its advanced stage and the receipt of the inspector's report. In this case, there is no material conflict between the policies of the adopted development plan and those of the emerging SWDPR that would alter the planning balance or officer recommendations as set out in the report for this application. The other late papers relate to additional neighbour comments, a representation from the applicant and further officer comments relating to further concerns raised by neighbouring property, along with officers recommending a revised condition 3 in relation to drainage. An additional neighbour response was received this morning, raising concerns about the feasibility and siting of the proposed soakaway, its potential impact on neighbouring land and the lack of supporting evidence. Officers' objections are also reiterated regarding the impact of the dormer window, overdevelopment and loss of privacy. A series of photos were provided by the neighbour and some of these have been incorporated within the officer presentation. Location plan here, application site outlined in red, sites located within a well-established residential area. Now looking at some site photographs of the front elevation and the street scene. Property of brick construction with a tile pitch roof. The front and side extensions are visible from within the street scene and have been designed so that the proposed side extension at first floor level is set down and set back from the frontage marginally. There is also a connected single-storey front extension with a pitched roof that spans across the frontage of the dwelling. The extensions have a brick and rendered finish which is consistent with the existing dwelling and other dwellings within the street scene. Now just looking at some wider photographs of the street scene. When considering the dwelling's context within the street scene, it is evident that there are similar two-storey side extensions and also single-storey front extensions within the street scene. Having considered the merits of the application and the wider street scene, whilst the concerns of the neighbouring properties with regard to the impact on the street scene are noted, it is considered that the frontage, the design of the proposed extension is appropriate and the extensions would not be a discordant addition to the street scene and they are designed so they are subservient in nature. Now moving to photographs around the rear of the property. Side extension continues around to the rear, which includes the rear two-storey extension and has a gable end facing into the rear garden of the dwelling and a single-storey flat-roofed element that you just see there. A loft conversion with a flat-roofed dormer window has also been erected, which is connected to the two-storey gable. With regards to flat-roofed dormer windows, it is also relevant to consider that it is possible to erect a rear flat-roofed dormer window under permitted development of up to 50 cubic metres in the case of a semi-detached dwelling. In this case, as the dormer is connected to a rear extension, the overall combined volume increase would exceed that would be allowed under permitted development rights. So should a similar dormer window be erected that is not connected to the two-storey extensions, it would be possible to erect this under permitted development. Similarly, with regard to the single-storey flat-roofed rear element, it is also possible to erect a single-storey flat-roofed rear extension under permitted development. It's considered that the two-storey gable is also not a discordant addition, as it's considered acceptable. The rear flat-roof dormer is less desirable. However, in considering this, there is also a large flat-roof rear dormer, as can be seen in the bottom right photo. Neighbour concerns have also been received with regards to overlooking from the rear dormer window. These concerns have been considered and taken account of the fallback position under permitted development. It is considered that the proposals would not give rise to an unacceptable level of overlooking or have an overbearing or dominant impact above a dormer that could be erected under permitted development rights. With regard to side-facing windows, there is one side-facing window in the upper floor of the extension. This is to a bathroom, so it is obscurely glazed. As such, there is unlikely to be a detrimental level of overlooking. A condition has also been recommended by officers in section 9 of the report, just to ensure that it is maintained as obscurely glazed. Some photographs here from the neighbouring property. Concerns have also been raised with regard to loss of light. The proposals have been considered against the guidance within the South Worcestershire Design Guide SPD, which utilises the 45 and 25 degree co-tests. When the 45 degree code is taken from the nearest habitable room window of number 12 Perwood Walk, which is an upstairs bedroom window, there is a breach. Similarly, with regard to number 8 Perwood Walk, there may also be a very minor breach of the 45 degree code from the ground floor patio door window. However, in the case of both neighbouring properties, when the 45 degree code assessment is taken, the proposals are not in breach. This is set out in further detail within the officer report, paragraphs 7.19 to 7.24. It is therefore unlikely that, considered that it's unlikely that the proposals would result in an unacceptable level of loss of light to neighbours. Previously approved planning application 2400757 HP is also of particular relevance to the current application. Permission allowed for erection of a two-storey side extension, single-storey front and rear extensions. The approved plans for this application are included on the right on the following comparison slides. Elements where the proposals differ are highlighted in yellow. To the frontage, changes just here include the introduction of the roof lights and also with regard to the materials, which is now brick rather than a rendered finish to the ground floor. Now, side elevation, the previous rear extension introduced a hipped roof. Gable is now proposed connecting to a flat roof dormer window to the rear. There are also some changes to window and door sightings. Now, looking at the rear, the changes from hip to gable and introduction of dormer windows can be seen, along with the alterations to doors and windows highlighted. Now, looking at the ground floor plans, little change here. Now, the first floor plans, there are 4 bedrooms here, both the original and proposed. And it's also noted that the previous approved rear element is marginally wider than on the current proposals. Now, moving on to second floor with additional bedroom with ensuite, which has been made possible due to the rear dormer window. Now, the block plan, development will result in a 5-bedroom dwelling, and in line with the Worcestershire County Council Streets Out Design Guide parking standards, a total of 3 parking spaces is required as shown on the plan. The plans have also been considered by the Highway Authority, the original application and no objections were raised. The previous scheme did not include any cycle parking, and as this application relates solely to amendments to the approved development, it would not be reasonable or consistent with planning principles to impose a new requirement for cycle parking at this stage. With regard to drainage, concerns have been raised throughout the course of the application by neighbours. This has been carefully considered by both officers and South Worcestershire Land Drainage, and members will also note the late paper which considers drainage and the recently erected outbuilding in the garden. To ensure that the outbuilding can be adequately considered in relation to drainage, condition 3 is recommended to be reworded to require that a revised drainage scheme is providing full details of the position and construction of a soakaway is provided. South Worcestershire Land Drainage have also advised that they're satisfied with the approach, and their comments are in the late paper. Concerns have also been raised with regard to overdevelopment. After the construction of the extension, a reasonable size rear garden of approximately 189 metres squared is retained. The dwelling also has the parking for the 3 vehicles. It is however considered that the site is at capacity with regards to development. Therefore, condition 4 recommends restricting future permitted development rights at the site. Concerns have also been raised with regard to party walls and encroachment. Further details have been requested from the applicant with regards to land ownership. However, whilst the concerns have been considered, they are the council do not have the authority to intervene or enforce boundary disputes between neighbours and landowners. Further to this, the approval of planning permission is only permission from the local authority to carry out the works and does not remove or imply any alteration to any other legal obligation of the landowner, including those set out within the Party Wall Act of 1996. Whilst the neighbour concerns have been considered in detail, and it is considered that the proposed extensions would not result in an unacceptable harm to the character or the appearance of the surrounding area or give rise to any unacceptable harms to neighbouring amenity. Proposals have also been considered having regard to the South Worcestershire Design Guide SPD, the relevant policies and the adopted SWDP and the emerging SWDP and the MPPF. So, for the reasons set out within the Officer Report and late papers, it is recommended that the retrospective planning permission is granted subject to bird and bat boxes, drainage, the removal of permitted development rights, and a condition requiring the retention of obscure glazing within the first floor side elevation window that are set out within section 9 of the Officer Report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Laura. The applicant did intend to come to the committee today, but unfortunately his car has broken down on the way, so we don't have him to speak and ask questions of, I'm afraid. So if we start with questions for the officer, thank you. Councillor Kimberley.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to ask a question to sort of help get my head around the framing of this discussion. During the site visit this afternoon, which was very helpful, I mean, I think we all appreciated having the chance to get a sense of the street setting of the property and the area around it. There was an immediate question which jumped out at a number of us, which related to a construction in the backyard of the property. Is that something which is pertinent to this conversation with this application today? It's my first question. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. The existing outbuilding within the garden, it is not a matter for our consideration today. It is being looked at by planning enforcement, who will check whether it is permitted development, but it's not a matter for the consideration of the committee today.
No, Councillor Agar.
Thank you. I think for clarity we could add or re-emphasise perhaps that condition 4 does require us to restrict future development so that whatever future decision is made about the garden building, that is really part of that overall idea that it is the area is as developed as it needs to be or should be, but that we are actually only considering the main building today.
Can I just check, but based on that then, the garden that you say is retained, 189 metres squared, that's what we saw today with that building in place at the back?
Through you, Chair. No, that was calculated prior to the we were made aware of the outbuilding, so it would be less.
So and that will be considered when you look at the outbuilding.
If it needs planning permission at that point, then that would be considered.
Okay, lovely, thank you. I hope that's clear for everyone. Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions for officers, if I could, please. The proposal is saying 3 car parking spaces on the front aspect of the property. Are those 3 car parking spaces, are they intended to be taken, they're not going to overhang on the pavement? Is there more than enough room to fit onto that driveway that's going to be allocated?
Through you, Chair, yes, the parking spaces are of an adequate size.
Is it a tight fit? It's important for my next question.
I wouldn't have thought so. I think they do meet the minimum size standards from the Highway Authority.
My question is, if I understand it correctly from what I'm looking at, there is no side access from the front of the property to the rear of the property. Is that correct?
So the side access is very tight. Whether you would be able to get through if you really squeezed, it may be possible, but not really.
So would it be fair to say, and maybe officers can clarify this, that in practice the refuse bins are going to have to be kept at the front of the property? Is that right?
Through you, Chair, yes. Yeah, it would be the case because it would be difficult to get it down the side access.
Thank you.
Great. I've got Councillor Cross. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a pity the applicant's not able to be here today because one of the questions I wanted to ask was about how it came about that the consent that was granted a couple of years ago and what's been built now is there's quite a number of differences. And I suppose my question for the officers is that something that we regularly come across? Are there entirely understandable reasons as to how that could come about. Is that anything that can be spoken about in this committee? It troubles me. I struggle slightly when retrospective applications come in, and then when there's been such a lot of variance, it just begs quite a few questions. And so, if that's appropriate for me to ask you at the moment, please do advise.
I'm happy to pick that up, and through you, Chair. I think in this situation, what we are comforted is the fact that the applicant applied for planning permission before they carried out any works. And they got planning permission for a two-storey side extension, rear extension, and single-storey extension. Exactly the same format as we're looking at. The difference is, as Laura's quite aptly highlighted through the presentation, are changes to the design, and actually in some respects it's actually reduced the massing of that two-storey wing, as Laura pointed out. Some of those things come about through construction, and quite often we find that there are changes that are made once builders get on site because of ground conditions or for cost of construction, and changes are made. Not always is planning permission sought before those changes are made, and that's where the applicant has come a little bit unstuck and has applied now retrospectively. So it is a common thing. It's not always the case, and there will be those who go through the right processes, but I think across the whole of the city boundaries, members will see on the weekly list non-material amendments or changes that are put in and they're under construction, and members will know in their own wards that they're under construction. So it is a common thing. I don't think it's been done with any poor intent. I think it is being done with the best intent for the family and for what they wanted in terms of their extensions. And we're now considering this as a new application. And I think the final question was, what implications has that? The fact that it's retrospective has no implications for your considerations today. You are considering it as if it was any other planning application based upon the policies that are set before you.
Thank you, very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cross. I think we were all wondering that. Councillor Kinsley?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask about the, under paragraph 7.2, talks about we've got the 45-degree code and the 25-degree code. I can't quite tell from the diagrams and from what I saw on the ground whether the, presumably the shape of the roof doesn't make any difference to that over the 25 and the 45. It's about the walls, and the walls are more or less built as originally intended. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, yeah, that would be correct, yeah.
Councillor Roach, did I see your hand go up?
Chair, yes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, but my main one is about the dormer extension, and I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand the original one was a smaller one and the one they actually built was significantly bigger. And I'm just wondering whether if the smaller one, let's say, would come under permissive development, but the bigger one wouldn't, whether that should be a concern for us as a planning committee.
Through you, Chair, there wasn't actually a dormer window included on the previous proposal. The dormer window has been added later. It is possible to erect some dormers under permitted development, but not connected to the two-storey side extension, because in permitted development we'd have to look at the total enlargement. So if it was connected to any other extensions, that's why it wouldn't be permitted development.
Okay, but when the builders get on site, they don't make a mistake from no dormer window to huge dormer window. That's not an error, a building error, is it? It's a deliberate decision to extend over and above the original planning. And it worries me that there seems to be a slight policy sometimes. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And it seems to me that if we're not careful, people take liberties in doing that. Particularly if there's a precedent set, and I'm not an expert in planning law, but it worries me that that principle might be perceived by some people.
Through you, Chair, I think you're absolutely right in terms of your comments. On this occasion, what what I believe has happened is if you take the dormer window on its own, as Laura quite rightly said, that would be permitted development. Not all builders know permitted development rights and the legislation in detail as well as they probably should. And I think there was an understanding that that didn't require planning permission, and so it was constructed, and it was only when officers examined it exactly that it was connected to that two-storey wing that then planning permission was required and the application was applied for. So I don't think it was a deliberate thing to say we're going to do this and you do your worst. I think it was a genuine attempt to try and provide something under permitted development, which didn't turn out to be the case.
Chair, my second question, if it's okay, is just to ask, I know you said we don't get involved in boundaries disputes, and I can understand that, but I wonder whether, if there is a scenario whereby someone develops something encroaching on over someone else's boundary, we talked about it before, near Nunnery, I think, you know, guttering over stepping the mark, as it were, whether, you know, if that is the case, it surely is better to have established that before granting permission than, you know, to shrug your shoulders afterwards and say, too late. It's very hard to take it down afterwards, but I wonder what the sort of view was on this one.
Through you, Chair, you are correct in the fact of when there's something overhanging or that you're building on somebody else's land, that is something that we do consider because you need to serve the correct legal notices. On this occasion, the building elements are not encroaching, the building elements are not overhanging. What we have is a difference of opinion between the neighbours of where their boundary fence should go. The boundary fence isn't part of the proposal, and so on this specific occasion, officers are absolutely correct, in my view, in terms of law, that this is not one for this planning application, because it's not concerning the development that's before you, it's concerning a boundary fence and where that boundary fence has been taken down for the extension and put back up. The boundary fence doesn't require planning permission, it's between those two parties to agree where they're going to put that boundary fence.
I've got Councillor Amos, please.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. Just let me get the notes. The original application, was that determined by committee or under delegated powers? Because I don't recall it committee.
Through you, Chair, it was delegated under delegated powers.
I would simply say shame on those people who made that decision then. Secondly, if the property does become a 7-bedroom property, under the design guide now, 5 bedrooms equals 3 car parking spaces. So if the house becomes 7 bedrooms, as is the fear of some local residents, then will we be asking for more car parking spaces or will that be overlooked? I'm referring to paragraph 7. Chair, I'm referring to paragraph 7.32, where it says 5 bedrooms, obviously with a design guide is 3 spaces. I accept that. But residents have expressed concern that it could be 7 bedrooms, because you can't regulate whether a room then becomes a bedroom. If it's 7 bedrooms, more car parking spaces are required. How will that be dealt with?
Through you, Chair, just looking at the first floor plan, there's obviously the roof plan that you've also seen. It's difficult to see how that 7 bedrooms could be created that would provide adequate sizes. But in any event, we are considering what is before us, and what is before us is a 5-bedroom property. And there is adequate spaces. We can't, as we've discussed before, you can't look into the crystal ball and anticipate what might or might not happen. We are considering what is before us, and there is a proposal for a 5-bedroom property with adequate parking for a family to reside in.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Round has answered that question. I think I know what the answer is, therefore nothing will be done if it expands. But anyway, that's another separate matter. But if we just deal with the facts, and it follows on from, I think, what Councillor Round or Councillor Rudge said, if we look at the extra, I mean, the property as it stands on the diagram, in my view, is hideous, not just because it's top heavy, but because the side elevation is a massive brick. I mean, there's no charm, there's no feature to it or anything. So whether it's the new SWDP or the old SWDP, it seems, frankly, that anything goes if this kind of thing is allowable. But if we look at the facts under paragraph 3.3, what are the differences? One, addition of a rear dormer. Then we've got two-storey rear extension, now has a gable end. Then we've got alterations to the position design of certain windows and doors. Then we've got roof lights within the front roof slope have been introduced. Now, I know Mr. Round's a very nice person, but one of those might have been a coincidence or ignorance of the builder. But are you seriously expecting me to believe that all those are accidents and they've just happened? Because, Chair, there is an issue here, and I think a previous colleague referred to it. It's the impression that is given that anything goes, that you ask for one thing and you do something else, and then you, by war of attrition, you come back to the planning committee to get permission for the rest that you've already built. And the answer, in my experience, long experience, has always been yes. I can't remember a single retrospective that's been turned down. So, of course, apply for one thing, get it, and then just build what you want and get permission for that. And so I think the problem with this, Chair, is that it's hideously ugly to start with and shouldn't have been given permission. And we're now being asked to approve more of it. And that's where I think we have to draw the line if the planning committee is to have any credence whatsoever. And I think it is important because there have been a number of objections. There's talk about overdevelopment and so on, and they've all been dismissed. So really, I can't really see the point of spending any more time discussing it because it's going to be passed anyway. But I would just say 7.22, where it says about consider the proposals are unlikely to result in an unacceptable loss of light. And the 7.24 says it's unlikely to result in unacceptable loss of light. Of course, an unacceptable loss of light in those two circumstances is a purely subjective judgment. It's not fact, Chair. It's a subjective judgment. And that's where I would disagree with those judgments. I think that they are unacceptable. And I think the tragedy is that we've got residents who already live there. They've expressed their views, and it's all for nothing because this is going to go ahead anyway. So I'm going to vote against it. I think it sets a bad example. It's ugly. It's going to be more ugly, and everything's going to be allowed. And so, frankly, there's no point in making any more comments about it.
All right, Councillor Amos. I just want to say that the people who went to the site visit today, I think I appreciate that the building now on the ground floor and the side is brick instead of render. And that side elevation, which is right next to the neighbour, if that had been render, there was absolutely no way they could have maintained it in a good way. And brick is a much better material when you can't easily maintain it. And also the front elevation, to have a brick base instead of render, is definitely an improvement on the streetscape when all the other front elevations look actually very similar. The front elevation, when we were there, didn't really stand out on the streetscape at all with other buildings that were there. I think, in my opinion, it fitted in quite well, in fact. I don't know whether officers want to comment on any of the other things that were said.
Just to say that in terms of the orientation, in terms of light, just dealing with the point that Councillor Amos talked about at the end, when we stand on site and the orientation of the properties, you can quite clearly see that the impact on those windows is not as great as it appears on the plan. And it is actually less, and given the orientation of the sun, the way that the sun would rise and set, there is, I would agree with the reports that there is going to be minimal impact on those properties. And yes, from the side elevation, if it was to stand alone, there is a massive brickwork. But when you're on site, it's next to another property that has a two-storey extension. And what you cannot see, you do not see that side elevation in the same way. You cannot stand and see that side elevation in that same way. So in terms of what is before us, members will have seen that on site, but officers are clear that this does meet, in their view, the policies. It doesn't cause any harm. And that's why we've recommended approval. We wouldn't be bringing something in terms of recommendation if we didn't believe in it. And just one final point in terms of this committee and retrospective applications. I think the difficulty that we have in terms of the scheme of delegation is that this committee considers all applications that are recommended for approval. And what members may not see is that officers work very hard with their delegations and refuse quite a number of applications. And there's been appeal quite recently for an annex, I'm not going to say the address, which is retrospective. It's subject to an enforcement notice to demolish the whole thing. And members, officers have defended that appeal and have won that appeal, and it's going through the enforcement notice appeal at the moment. So whilst I appreciate it may appear in the public that officers only recommend approval for things, I have to say I sign a lot of refusal elements, and we will continue to do that and defend them in appeal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think that's really important to say. I mean, we get our member updates every week which list the applications, and if you look at them you will see that a number are refused, and there was the one that was upheld this week that we saw, you know, and it did stipulate exactly what you talked about today, the rules of 45 degrees, and you know, and how important that is, and how it is a very technical measurement that the inspector said had been done exactly in the right way, and that's really important as well. Okay, I've got Councillor Agar next, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think you made a very valid point about what it looks like from the public viewpoint. It's quite different from the front and rear. From the front, you really would, there's barely any difference, you know. From the rear, I think the impacts are really quite marginal, those that we did see. And you know what a stickler I am, I hate creeping development. So, Councillor, I think you would have been reassured if you'd been able to see it. And the other thing I would just say for clarity, Councillor Round, that you made this comment about the passageway, and you're quite right, it is very narrow. I mean, a slender person would get down there, and I might even have to go crabwise myself. But even a slender person with a bike wouldn't get down it, you know. So, but we're not actually requiring bicycle storage here on this particular application. So actually, I think we're all right, but the bins would have to be at the front, it's quite correct.
Yeah, and Councillor Agar, lots of people live in terrace houses which don't have any access at all and have different arrangements for bin collections. So I think that's very fair to say. I've got Councillor Udall now, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Responding to what Councillor Amos has said, I think you should be careful about criticising things which are ugly. People say I'm ugly, and I wouldn't be you refuse permission to exist. But I think Mr. Round has been very charitable with his comments about retrospective development. I don't necessarily share his charitable status on this. I think we are being treated a little bit with contempt. Too often we are seeing retrospective applications come forward where developers and householders believe the rules don't simply apply to them. And I think it's, and I'm grateful because I'm aware of what he said about the number of applications which are refused, and I think that does show that we do actually stand up to these kind of developers. And I know we can't take that into account on this application. I just wish we could, bluntly. There's a couple of questions which I have, and I've picked up on a similar issue to Councillor Amos about the concerns about it becoming a 7-bedroomed house. I don't think, and I seek clarification, that there's anything we can condition about that, because I'm aware every single room in a house could effectively be a bedroom apart from the bathroom and the kitchen, as I understand it. So there could be reason for expansion, which leads me into the consideration of a potential future use as a house of multiple occupation on this site, which would totally be inadequate for this site. And I seek some clarification that the removal of permitted development rights would make that problematic for the developer stroke owner. I want to pick up on the issue about the bins, which was mentioned earlier. I seek clarification if the bins have to be kept on the front driveway. I wasn't at the visit this morning, so I don't know the answer to this question. Would that make it impossible for 3 cars to actually park on the driveway? Would that restrict the ability for us to actually have the 3 cars there? If it does, that does give me serious concern about the impact this would have on highway infrastructure if we're conditioned in 3 spaces and we can't actually use them because bins are stored on them. Just seek some clarification about that if I can, please.
Through you, Chair, in terms of what the bedrooms could be used for, as I've said before, we're considering what we've got, and any property, even without planning permission before us, can split up their bedrooms however they wish to do. But we're considering what's before us. In terms of can it be used as a HMO, not without planning permission, and that's the whole purpose of Worcester being in a really beneficial position of having an Article 4, which other places are now looking at doing exactly the same. So it would need planning permission. So in terms of what can we do, we've already done it and we've safeguarded that. In terms of where the bins go, yes, they go at the front, as does the next door neighbour, as does the next door neighbour before that. And there is adequate room for the bins to be stored as well as the 3 cars.
Okay, I've got Councillor Round again, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a few questions. I know others have got opinions about the application, but I've got a few questions, if that's okay. So, looking at this access to the side, which is my thing at the moment, but if you look on the ground floor plan on page 60, on this there, it's got an access to the side of the property, and it's a rather large entrance area. Now, I know we can't say what the rooms are going to be used for, but I would like to seek some clarification because officers have had contact with the applicant, who is not here, unfortunately, and we could ask questions. But there's a side entranceway. Now, I wasn't able to go to the site inspection. I do a dreadful thing like a job, so I couldn't go. So if you're going to use the side, and why have you got a side entranceway? If it's so narrow, why have we got a side entranceway? That's my first question. That's that one. And then the other question is, we have these rooms on the ground floor, playroom, lounge, living room. The one that's marked living room, does that have an external window? It can't because it's a semi-detached house. So the other room that's on the left-hand side, what is that meant to be? I know it's not relevant, but it is sort of relevant to get a picture as to what's going on. Then if it was about the layout, then the other thing is when we looked at the officer's presentation at the photographs, and again, I wasn't there today, when were these alterations done? And am I right in thinking there's quite a bit of debris in the rear garden that's been left? Is that correct? Has it gone?
Through you, Chair, I'll deal with that last one first. Yes, there is still debris in the garden, but it's not as much as you saw on the photos. So it's still an active building site. They're still completing some of the works. So there is still debris, this building materials around. In terms of the rooms, the living, where it says living, it's a through room, so it's what's it called? Open plan. Thank you for helping me out. It's an open plan space. So when we walked through the property with members at lunchtime, you walk into this open plan kitchen sort of living space. There is a lounge with a door. There's a playroom with a door. We didn't go and look at the small room, but I'm anticipating that would be a utility room because there is no other utility room there. So that would be the utility room. And in terms of the side access, it is tight, but as Councillor Agar quite rightly put it, you can get out. And it's entirely up to them whether they put a door there or not. From our point of view, it's not a planning matter whether they can use or cannot use it. It's about, in terms of the design, and the design works. So you can actually get out of the door and you can see that the door opens inwards. You can step out into that space, and that's obviously a choice that they've made.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's given me some insight. I have to be honest, given those answers that I've heard just now and the comments made by others, I'm really concerned about this application. And I have to be honest, whether it looks okay from the street scene and as you look at the property, I'm not comfortable at all with it. And I think whilst we're looking at the application in front of us now, I do feel that we represent the whole of Worcester, and I do feel that we have to give consideration from a planning point of view, but also what the neighbours are feeling. And there's been enough fear from neighbours about this application, enough for them to raise fairly valid concerns, if I'm honest with you. And I think if I look at the way the extension has been done, I think we're really sending a message at the moment to people who make applications. Do what the hell you like, because we really allow it, and you can apply afterwards because planning committee will give it. So I'm really worried about this application and the way it's come to committee. I'm not at all comfortable. In fact, I'm not happy with it, that we've been put in this position where a previous application has been approved under delegated. And I know what you've said, Mr. Round, about this, but we're in a very difficult position now as a planning committee. And I think this is a pretty appalling application, if I'm honest with you. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Barnes now, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I attended the event this morning to actually look at the property. And the first thing that struck me was actually the side entrance. Nobody can get their bins out. The neighbours can't get their bins down the side now. The neighbours can't get a bike down the side now because it's all been fenced off. So nobody has effective rear access. So it isn't just this property, it's the next door neighbour as well that's been affected. Second thing is that the large building in the back garden, which wasn't taken account of in the garden spec that they put forward, has got a letterbox. And that, I think, speaks volumes, especially as the applicant isn't here to explain why a letterbox is required. Not that anybody could get down there, certainly not a postman round the side, because it's too narrow. It's probably less than half a metre down the side to get to. So I don't think that's very likely that they could at the moment use it as a separate dwelling, but a letterbox, as far as I'm concerned, is an issue that speaks quite highly. I'm not quite sure on the top floor, on bottom left of the plan, there's a space which is quite big and it's not specified what it is. There's no door to it, but there's a window to it. So I wonder what that space is. I think those are my main concerns, apart from the very fact that they've got planning permission and they build something else, and that always gets my goat and most other people's goats. So perhaps those questions could be answered.
Okay.
I'm happy to pick those questions up.
Sure. Yeah, I've just got an idea of what that room might be, because if they've done their loft, they haven't got a loft anymore. So that's probably where they put all their stuff that we all put in our lofts. That's all I'm thinking. All right.
There's no door to it.
Through you, Chair, in terms of the access for the neighbour, you'll have noticed on site that actually the neighbour has built right up to their boundary. So in terms of could the neighbour have got their wheelie bins down the side of their property? No, they couldn't have in the first place. They would have had to have trespassed onto the adjacent property. And in actual fact, the application site has come short of their boundary, and there is that narrow passageway, whereas the next door neighbour has built right up to their boundary. So in terms of has it impacted on the access to the next door property? No, it hasn't, because they had already taken that away with their own two-storey side extension. In terms of that space, I don't know what it's used for. Chair has set out that it could be used for storage. It might well be. But in terms of the roof light that's provided, I believe that given the height of it within the roof, that would be an additional light into the shower room area rather than that storage room area.
Okay, I've got Councillor Kimberley now, please.
Thank you, Chair. The conversation has progressed somewhat since I put my hand up initially, and some of the comments that I was planning to make have already been made. I would very much like to echo the point that for those of us who were at the site visit earlier, I think the document perhaps does not do justice to the actual impression that one gets of the building from the outside in the streetscape where it is set. I think it bears remembering and noting that a significant number of the other properties, in fact, I think nearly every property on the road that it is surrounded by, they have all been heavily modified in similar and very much similar ways. You can sort of make out, if you squint at it, where the line might have originally stood, that was the back wall of each of the properties in the terrace, but it's almost completely hidden now, almost completely obscured by similar extensions. From where I'm sitting, and I don't wish to misunderstand colleagues around the room, I feel as though we as a committee have found ourselves in a position that has happened before, which is neighbours have understandable frustrations and concerns based on the overall nature of the development that has taken place at the property. It is quite clear that the boundary has been built very close up to, and there is very little breathing room between this property and its neighbour at number 12. There's very, very little breathing room, and I can understand why that would be making some uncomfortable. I think the challenge is that as a planning committee, I'm not clear, and perhaps this is one for officers to answer, I'm not clear that there is much that we can actually do about the narrowness of that side access. I have to be honest, not wishing to speculate, if we were looking at the original footprint of the building and we were being asked to give planning permission for the extension to go up to the level that it currently does, I'm not 100% sure that we would give that permission, but I'm also not sure that that it's actually within scope for this discussion, if that makes sense. And there was one other point I wanted to get to, which was just really to ask, in terms of real-world consequences, and for those sort of listening in from home, if we were to actually refuse permission here, what would be the concrete consequences of doing so? Because I'm not clear, again, that that would lead to all of this being undone. So I would appreciate some clarity on those points. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, and in terms of the provision of the proposals before us, as I think I've answered already, officers and members are in the position that they consider it as though it wasn't there, and officers have done that and considered that in that position. That is the current position, and I appreciate that members will be aware of the changes to the MPPF that might be coming and other implications that might be coming in terms of retrospective applications, but we're not there as it stands at the moment. So officers have made this assessment based upon that. In terms of the narrowness of the access, you'll have seen from the next door neighbours, they have been granted planning permission with exactly the same, if not slightly a narrower access. So in terms of where we're in exactly the same position. What's the real world consequences for refusal? Well, that would be a consideration of the enforcement implications. And let's take theoretically that it was considered to be expedient to enforce. Well, it would be to require the building to be built as per the original proposed plan. So that would mean demolition of the two-storey rear extension to make it wider, because if you remember, it was wider on the previous one. It would be to reduce the dormer so that it was within permitted development rights. In terms of the single-storey extension, it wouldn't change. In terms of the two-storey extension, the only thing that would change would be the requirement to render that. So in terms of bringing it back, there are certain consequences that would mean that actually the two-storey, the wider, in terms of one neighbour, they would have a wider extension visible. So it would be back to where it was for the approval. We consider that these changes are not detrimental, and I think as some of the comments that have been made, there are some betterments in terms of the materials and in terms of maintenance and in terms of how that impacts on neighbours. So from an officer's point of view, we are content that it is suitable, whether it's retrospective or not.
If you don't mind me just coming back, just to try and sort of encapsulate that as briefly as I can, it sounds to me as though the options we're choosing between are the building more or less as it stands, or a different version wherein the concerns raised by neighbours would not be addressed in any way whatsoever and might arguably actually be worsened. Would that be correct for me to say?
From an officer's point of view, we consider that both schemes were acceptable, but there are better elements as part of this scheme, and there are elements that are not quite as good as the previous one. It's a sort of a pick and mix between the two, if that's the right thing of saying.
Okay. I've got Councillor Kinsley next, please. Thank you.
Yes, are we sort of moving into the more of a debate thing now? I might just had a sort of a comment rather than a question for officers. But it was just to say, again, as somebody that was, again, there today. I mean, as others have said, what is there now is actually very much in keeping, rightly or wrongly, with other buildings. I don't, and I agree with my colleague over Councillor Uda, that I don't think it's really up to us to kind of be passing judgments in terms of whether we think something's ugly or not. I mean, you know, it's not our building. But as it happens, what we saw today is consistent with a slightly higgledy-piggledy street, both at the front and at the back. So in fact, what I saw was that the gable that is there now is actually also is the same on a further house down the road. So actually what is there now is very much in keeping with other surrounding buildings. The same with the dormers, virtually every property and properties behind. It's an area where people have wanted to extend their houses and, you know, and they've done that. So I didn't see anything wrong with it at all. I do think the changes that are made on paper, the actual changes compared to paper are minor. I could well understand that they went ahead and made those changes without realising that they needed to get subsequent permission. But now seeking permission, I have no problem with it at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kinsley. I've got Councillor Cross, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, today's site visit was really informative. For seeing the house in context, comparing with neighbouring properties, as my colleagues just said. I mean, scruffiness of a building site is more to do with being a good neighbour and really not within our gift of a planning committee. Similarly, poor placement of a garden fence, which restricts access, actually for both properties. That could be easily remedied and is also not our gift. Presence of a letterbox in the garden room, the garden room, as we saw on site, was being used for storage. And there's clear sort of building regs and other regs about whether one can or cannot live in reside or dwell in a garden room or sleep in a garden room. So that's a totally different matter. Whether lounge or dining room or playroom are used for bedrooms is not within our gift. I think it's really important. We are a regulatory function. We've got to be driven by the plan, by the technical points, not by sentiments. Absolutely sympathise with people with concerns, and I think a lot of the concerns that we have perhaps arise from people saying, hang on, I thought this was being built, but that's different. One way to wind your neighbours up is to do different from what they thought was happening. And a phrase that we often hear is, in the spirit of no surprises, let's work together on something. And I think a lot of this is just really about, on a small scale, sort of relations with neighbours, not actually within our gift on the planning. I can see a lot of technical merits to what we're seeing now compared to before. I do lament the lack of cycle parking, cycle storage, but again, I can understand why that would be inappropriate for us to insist upon now. I think with a little bit of goodwill, an awful lot of the issues could be resolved, and utterly instrumental things like light and overshadowing. It was very helpful this afternoon to see exactly where the light shadows were, and actually really wasn't a problem that was immediately apparent on the day, and you can see how this it's easy to have concerns about a plan that I also had concerns when I saw the plans, but it was when I saw how it was on site, I thought actually this was very helpful, and so I will be voting for this because I don't see the technical reasons for voting against it, and a lot of the concerns are non-planning related, and there's a very real risk in terms of consequences. Yeah, if we are without good reason or technical anchors for our arguments, without foundations, rejecting an application, there is also an appeals cost risk as well. So I think we need to bear in mind not just the difference between what was previously consented and what has been built. I do have concerns. I did want to ask the questions about how these changes came about, but that is not before us, and that's less material than actually what are we looking at now. Does this fit within the streetscape? Does this match? And when you're looking at them on satellite view, on maps, etc., and seeing the plans, this is not a huge land grab. This is not something out of line. So I feel there's nothing really to hang a refusal on, and I do absolutely endorse condition 4, is it? The removal of permitted development, and absolutely the concerns about drainage, which are addressed in condition 3. So that is why I'll be supporting this.
Councillor Agar, yes, you were next, actually.
May I propose, Chair? I'm in broad agreement with Councillor Cross here. I mean, we have to think of the planning balance. And while it's not wonderful, I don't think it's bad enough to refuse. And I do not think we'd be considered reasonable to us to pull it all down. It isn't that I think from the public point of view, from the front, the facade is pretty much of a muchness with the rest of the streetscape. There's no question about it. Seeing it simplified what I thought about it. It's much more complicated when you look at it on paper than it is actually going there and seeing it. When you look at the rear of it, as has been said by a number of councillors, there are a lot of other buildings along the street, a lot of other residences which have done almost the same. It doesn't actually look unusual in that sense. I really do think we would be unreasonable in terms of planning balance to refuse this one. So I'm going to propose it, if that's okay. I mean, we'll see where we are.
I don't think we should be, they might not have gone about this the right way, the way that we wanted, but we can't be against residents improving their homes. I think when you don't have real grounds for refusal, that's my feeling at the moment, you know, and actually I like to see investment in our city and investment in our homes. People are struggling, there's a housing crisis, you know, and if you need 5 bedrooms because you've got lots of people in your house and you need a big kitchen because you're feeding dinners to lots of people, I mean, that's where we are, isn't it? I've got a few people who want to speak still. I just want to check with you still want to speak. So I've got Councillor Amos.
It's just a technical question for the officer, Chair.
Absolutely, go ahead.
On the ground floor plan, as colleagues have mentioned, there is this area which is with no description. Now, the officers have described this application as 5 bedroom. So could you just clarify one point, which is that if an applicant comes along and leaves a whole area with no description, because obviously there's consequences on parking requirement depending on the number of bedrooms, then why doesn't any applicant simply increase the size of the bedroom or simply not describe, then reduce the number of bedrooms, and therefore you're reducing the number of the requirement for the parking? because that doesn't have a description, and it could be that the residents think that could be transformed into a bedroom. I don't know, but I don't know what that area is. But if you're going to be specific enough to describe it as a 5-bedroom property, it would be helpful if we knew what all the rooms were for, not just leave an area blank. That's my concern, because clearly, if that were described as a bedroom, then it would be a 6-bedroom requiring more parking, but obviously it isn't. So you can understand people's scepticism about this whole process, frankly.
Through you, Chair, I think that was, I'm right in saying that was a question, because you said it was a technical question for officers, so I'm happy to pick up the technical question.
It's a question for you, Mr. Round, because you're very generous with your answers.
So, I agree again that it would be extremely helpful to have it labelled, and it would be really helpful to understand what that room was for. But quite clearly, it's not big enough for a bedroom. It's actually smaller than the quite small, modest bathroom that's on the first floor plan. And as I indicated earlier, I would assume that it is either for storage or as a utility room, but it's certainly not big enough. It wouldn't meet the standards for a bedroom. But what we have very clearly what the bedrooms are, and it's been set out as a 5-bedroom property. That is what they're proposing. I wouldn't anticipate that that is a bedroom, and it wouldn't meet the size criteria for one.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Round, but through you, Chair. But the question is the technical question, which is that if there is an area on a plan which has no description, we can all of us make all sorts of assumptions about whether it's too big or too small for this, that, and the other. But do the officers not require the plan to say what the space is designated for? Because in this case, you may be right, it's too small for a bedroom, but that doesn't mean you should not ask for a description for what it is, because if you've got size a bit bigger, would you then have asked, is this a bedroom or not?
I'd like to just say, through you, Chair, yes, because that is the process. It's not a requirement under the legislation to provide labels for rooms, but as members be aware, officers have gone through the process. If it was a bigger room that was of a size of a bedroom and it was unlabelled, or it was labelled up as a study, there would be some questions in terms of what that was. But given the size of that room, officers didn't feel on this occasion the requirements to ask what that room was.
Okay, I've got a check with Councillor Kimberley. You had something to say, I think?
Very briefly, Chair, I just wanted to say, I think it just bears remembering we are a regulatory committee, not a policy committee at the end of the day, and from my perspective, that always means we're not a blunt instrument for prosecuting grudges. The question we're asking is whether this application is sufficiently compliant with the law and the rules under the SWDP as to merit approval. The question is not whether we personally like it. I think it's safe to say that plenty of people don't and won't, but as Councillor Cross rightly says, technical details are king in a planning committee, and I do not see the technical details that would support refusal. So I would like to second, and I'd like to move forwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Kinsley. Councillor Roche, did you want to say something? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I just want to come back to the point I made at the beginning, really, which I think is a material consideration, and it's got nothing to do whether we like it or not. That isn't an issue for me. I wish colleagues would stop saying it's an issue of whether you like it or not. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with whether, for me, the dormer window, I think, is a significant problem because it wasn't on the original application. It doesn't come on within permissive development. It exceeds the allowance under Schedule 2, Part 1, Class B, Permitted Development Order 2015, which is a material consideration, in my opinion, humbly. And the fact that they didn't put it on the original application, not even a small one, a small dormer window would have been accepted, I'm sure. In a previous meeting, we rejected the officers rejected an application that had one of these huge dormer windows that went from one side of the house to the other. And when the applicant came back with a smaller dormer window, it was accepted. And I perfectly understand that. I understand the logic of that. What I have a problem with, and it's nothing to do with the messiness of the garden or the narrowness of the alleyway, it's to do with this sort of dormer window issue. So my amendment would be, if they were willing to do something about that, then I'd be happy to pass it. But otherwise, I think there's a degree of disrespect, I think, and disdain shown towards planning in general. If you can do that size of development retrospectively, then I don't quite understand how the system is meant to function. It doesn't seem to me to be functioning effectively or as professionally as it should. And that's my objection, and that's why I'm not happy with this application.
Yeah, well said.
Through you, Chair, if I may just respond to that, and it might be helpful for members. In terms of permitted development, and I know members will be aware of this, but it's probably just worth reiterating for members of the public. If there is an exceedance of an allowance under permitted development, all that requires is that it needs planning permission. So it's not whether it's something that's acceptable or not, it comes to us to consider planning permission. And that's what you've got. So if it had met those criteria, you wouldn't be considering it at all, because they could do it whether we liked it or not. So what we have got is, we're into the realms of, do we feel that it's acceptable based upon policy? And what officers have set out within the presentation, and what both with the photos and members will have seen on site, is that there are the same dormer windows throughout the rest of the locality. There is one about 4 doors up. There is a similar dormer which is behind the property, and you saw it on the photo. It has a Juliet balcony and has double doors to be able to look out of that property. So dormer windows, is it acceptable in terms of the characteristics of the area? Officers have assessed it. We have seen others within the locality. Is it a characteristic? Yes, it is. Does it cause any harm visually to the property? No, it doesn't. Does it cause harm to neighbours? No, it doesn't. So we're going down the normal assessment in terms of design and impact. So just because it doesn't meet permitted development rights doesn't mean that it's always unacceptable. There is those considerations. So in terms of, yes, it doesn't meet permitted development rights, but what your officers are advising you is that it does meet policy SWDP 21 and also the emerging policy in terms of design. So hopefully that's been helpful.
Right, I think I've got Councillor Round. Did you want to say something? And then Councillor Udall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just a point. I wasn't going to say anything again, but to be honest, I'm a little bit upset and resentful of some members on this committee that are making comments that we're judging applications on the basis of because we've taken issue about the way something looks or because there's some refuse or something in the garden. I find that a little bit offensive, if I'm honest with you, and I expect better. You know, we can all have our opinions about what we're on planning committee, and I know it's a regulatory committee and we have to go via the law, that's planning law and officer advice, but we are entitled to have our opinion as councillors. And, you know, I may not agree with one colleague, and very often I don't agree with many other colleagues, sorry, Councillor Amos, but, you know, we're all entitled to have opinions whether we agree with others or not. But I find there's a little bit of an undertone this afternoon.
Councillor Round, do you have something that is specific to, because what we've got, we have a proposer and we have a seconder. So really, I just wanted to comment if you've got anything new to say about the application, not really about the conduct of the committee.
No, okay, fair enough, Chair, I do accept, but I do think that from me, in terms of what we can refuse this application, but I know it's going to be passed anyway, is that there has been an over-intensification here in terms of the property, but I accept officers are saying that no, it meets all the criteria, that's where we're at. But I just wanted to make the comment to say we are entitled to have our own opinions here. Thank you.
Councillor Udall.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to pay tribute to Councillor Rias for actually calling this application in. I think that's been a useful exercise. It's been concerns have been raised, discussed and addressed, and the issues have been talked about within plan and law. We may not come to the same agreement or same conclusion as the result of it, but I believe it was important that this actually did come back to committee, and I congratulate you for that. If it's based on my personal view, with my personal prejudices, my personal concerns, I would vote against this. But it isn't. It's based on our judicial capacity as planning committee members, and we have to act within planning law. And I have seen nothing to date which would indicate to me that I can refuse this application and get away with it, bluntly, and that does concern me. One question I do have, because I will support the recommendation, reference has been made to what's been done elsewhere in the road, neighbouring properties and down the street. One thing which was always drummed into me through planning training, time and time again, is that there's no precedent in planning law, and what's already been agreed elsewhere should not be relevant in this consideration. Can I see a clarification on that? Because just because it's happened next door or down the road, surely that doesn't mean to say it's acceptable here.
Through you, Chair, again, I would agree with those comments. In terms of the considerations officers have, is you're looking at the characteristics of an area. Just because something has been done, I think precedent works both ways. Precedent can show what is good, and precedent can show what is bad. But it does provide characteristics to the area. So, for example, and I won't spend long, about 4 doors up, there is a 2-storey flat roof extension to the side. Are we going to say that that is acceptable and that's what needs to be done? No. What officers did with this one is looked at a setback extension with a pitched roof. But in terms of a 2-storey extension, it's been there. So we're looking at the characteristics of the area and that assessment. There might be other things that have done, but what we're looking at is the impact of what's proposed around the rest of the character. So yes, it's not a precedent, but it's a characteristic argument, and there could be something that is absolutely horrendous, but actually it sets out the character. There could be something really good, and that sets forth the character. Hope that helps.
So is it, Paul, that, you know, the characteristic of the age of some of these houses is it's inevitable that some people are going to have made changes to them to make them suitable for their family circumstances?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's it. You know, they've got new houses opposite. There are no changes to them. People have just bought them because they're happy with them. You know, they look really nice, actually, the new houses, don't they? Right, so, yeah, they're nice, the ones across the road. They look really nice. Have I got anybody else? Or we all, if we go back to the proposer and seconder. Yeah, we have got the amended condition, haven't we? Which is the SUDS condition 3 as outlined in the late paper. We haven't got any other amendments to any conditions. So are your proposals and seconders based on those conditions? Right, okay. So are we happy therefore to move to a vote? I think, you know, I'd like to thank members for the debate. I think it's been a good one. Lots of opinion which we like, and actually looking at the merits and the weaknesses and strengths of planning law is always interesting. I find it very exciting. Right, it's quite nerdy, isn't it? Right, anyway, so shall we see all hands in favour, please? All those against? And that means there are no abstentions. That has therefore carried. Next item is any other business, and I don't have any, so I'll draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.